Hello everyone, my name is Jordan Beckius and I am the diagnostician for Group 8, and the disorder that our group chose to do this presentation over is Alzheimer's disease. So first I'm going to start off talking to you all about the different DSM-5 criteria and explaining that and what's necessary to receive the Alzheimer's diagnosis. And then I'll be talking about the different changes made in the DSMs over time and why these changes have been made to the Alzheimer's criteria. And then I'll be talking about the prevalence of Alzheimer's in the United States. So first we're going to start off on slide 2. And it's important to note before looking at the information on this slide that Alzheimer's is a progressive disease, which means that in the earlier stages, their symptoms will be a lot more mild and may possibly even go unnoticed. Whereas then over time, as the disease progresses and the person gets older, then their symptoms will become more severe. So just note, it starts off mild and over time progresses to become harsher and more severe. Okay, so first we're looking at mild neurocognitive impairment. So the first criteria listed here is that the cognitive decline of 1 to 2 standard deviations from normal based off of formal testing. So basically what this means is that you have to be showing obvious cognitive difficulties or difficulties in functioning or thinking, memory, different things like that. And this has to be attributed specifically to Alzheimer's disease. So you can't have another medical disorder or psychiatric disorder that's causing this impairment of cognitive functioning. It has to be because of Alzheimer's. And those two criteria are also listed for major neurocognitive impairment, where you have to have the cognitive decline and it has to be attributed to Alzheimer's. Now, the main difference between these two neurocognitive impairments is that someone who is in their earlier stages of Alzheimer's will be diagnosed with mild neurocognitive disorder. And that is because their symptoms are mild, obviously, and they aren't interfering with their daily functioning. This person can still do all their normal daily tasks and maybe just have a little difficulty doing it, but they can do it. So they are still independent. Whereas someone with major neurocognitive impairment, their symptoms have become so severe that they can no longer go throughout their days independently. They need someone there reminding them where they are, someone to cook their meals, someone to get them up in the morning, someone to help them get dressed even. So the main difference between the two is that someone with mild is independent and someone with major neurocognitive impairment is no longer independent. They are dependent. Okay. Now, at the bottom, I also have listed some of the common cognitive disturbances that people with Alzheimer's may face. So the first one being aphasia. And an aphasia is a language disturbance. So an example of this could be you're having a conversation with someone with Alzheimer's and their sentences just aren't making sense. They aren't using the right words, different things like that. Next is apraxia. And that is the inability to carry out motor function. So it could be something as basic as this person's very clumsy, they fall over a lot, they don't have good balance or coordination, or it could even progress to someone not being able to walk or do anything by themselves, basically. Next is agnosia, and that is the failure to recognize objects. So someone with Alzheimer's simply may not recognize their own children or their spouse, or it could even be something as they don't recognize the town they're in or the house they're in, even if it's theirs. They simply don't recognize things they normally would. Next is the disturbance in executive functioning, and this has to do with activities that dealing with planning, organizing, or even things such as sequencing, so counting or color coordinating things these people really struggle with. Okay, next we're going to move on to slide 3, where here I have listed the different DSM changes made over time. So first I'm going to start out talking about the changes that were made from DSM 3 and 4 that changed over in 5. So The first major change that was found in DSM-3 and 4, is that it required the impairment of memory and cognition in order to receive the Alzheimer's diagnosis. Where now in DSM-5, it only requires the impairment of cognition. Although memory still is, having memory issues is a very common symptom of Alzheimer's. It's probably the most, memory loss is the most common symptom, but it's just not a requirement to be diagnosed with Alzheimer's anymore. The next major change is that all of the criteria for Alzheimer's was listed under the title Current Criteria for Dementia and Alzheimer's, whereas in DSM-5, the word dementia has been removed, and instead it's been replaced with the mild and major neurocognitive impairment, and that was done in order to focus on the decline of mental function rather than the deficit in function. So not focusing on where this person will end up, but how their mental functioning is declining over time. Okay, next we'll look at the changes made from DSM-2 to DSM-3 and 4. So the one major change that I found between 2 and 3 and 4 is that instead of having the title Current Criteria for Dementia and Alzheimer's, this was listed under Chronic Organic Brain Syndrome. So that was just what Alzheimer's or dementia was known as in the past, and then it was changed in DSM-3 and 4 to be the Current Criteria for Dementia and Alzheimer's. Alright, next we're going to be moving on to slide 4. And this slide is about the prevalence of Alzheimer's in the United States. And the all-around prevalence rate is around 14%, which means 14% of the United States population will be affected by Alzheimer's at some point in their lifetime. So I have two graphs listed here, and the one on the left, we'll look at that one first, the pie chart. And this graph is showing the ages of people with Alzheimer's dementia. So, as we can see, the small purple section shows that around age 65 is when the youngest people are diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So that's when the early onset comes in, the more mild symptoms. So that is where they'll start out. And then I noticed that the largest age group affected is ages 75 to 84. And that range, 75 to 84, takes up 45% of that pie chart, which means that people ages 75 to 84 make up 45% of that 14% of the overall U.S. population. So basically, people 75 to 84 account for almost half of that 14%. Okay, next we'll look over to the chart on the right, the bar graph, where I have listed that in order to show the sex difference between men and women in terms of Alzheimer's. So basically the difference is that women are affected way more than men. Around 2/3 of all Alzheimer's patients are female. So women have a way higher chance of developing this in their lifetime, and there's no one specific reason for this, but there have been possible reasons searched out and found. So the first one being that women live longer than men. And this is a possible reason because the older someone gets, the greater the risk of developing Alzheimer's, or the greater risk of it becoming more severe. So say women are alive longer than men, they have a longer chance to develop Alzheimer's or even have it show through. Some men may die without even knowing they have it, but women, if they live longer, you'll be able to see that change over time. So women are affected more than men. And then another reason for this could be because women have a higher risk of depression. And depression has been found to be a risk factor for Alzheimer's disorder, or disease, Alzheimer's disease. And having depression in your midlife gives you a 70% increased risk of developing Alzheimer's. So since women have a higher risk of developing depression, then therefore they have a higher risk of developing Alzheimer's. So this was the end of my section of this presentation. Over Alzheimer's, just to recap, we went through the diagnostic criteria and the history of Alzheimer's disease, as well as the prevalence it holds in the United States. Thank you.